This is Open Minds Radio. Here again, your host, UFO paranormal researcher and journalist, Alejandro Rojas.
So that I knew we would get into details, especially about a couple things I wanted to talk about so I could play it for you all on the air. But this was for the profile that we did on the magazine. And we essentially hung on to this for a little while, just for a few months, because just in case we got sick or maybe the building blew up, we had a program that we could throw online for you and have one in the can ready for you. So even if we were, hurt and at the hospital, we were still going to come through for our listeners should anything happen, because that's how dedicated we are. This interview, though, is really great because we went into detail about an event in 1983 where Linda Howe was invited to the Kirtland Air Force Base, and she was shown some secret government documents about UFOs. So very interesting. I think this case is important because it demonstrates that there was some sort of, Air Force project where they were either spreading disinformation or messing with her somehow, and she shares detail, blow by blow, everything that happened in this trip to the Air Force Base. And then she also shares why she thinks that happened, the fallout and everything like that. And then she talks some more about some of the latest events that have happened and a little bit about Rendlesham Forest, which is a case that she's really into right now. And it's a case that she's going to be talking about at the UFO Congress. In fact, she's going to have John Burroughs and James Peniston come up to the stage with her at the Congress and do some Q&A. And then we just confirmed that Charles Halt, he's really the highest ranking Air Force officer to be out talking about UFOs. He's going to be there too, doing his own separate presentation and doing some Q&A and stuff like that as well. He's going to be here also to sign Leslie Kean's book, because he was another one who contributed to that book. So we're going to have what James Peniston wrote on that book, Nick Pope did. So we're going to have 3 of the contributors for that book, including Leslie Kean herself. So you're going to be able to get all kinds of important signatures on that book, and those things are going to go priceless. You're going to want to get some extra. You'll probably be able to sell them on eBay for thousands and thousands of dollars. So buy up those books, and we'll have a lot of magazines there, because if you get your magazine signed by me and Antonio, those will probably go for millions and millions of dollars on eBay. You people are going to make money off of this Congress. That's why it's so important that you come to the UFO Congress. Remember, that's February 23rd to the 27th. You can find out more at ufocongress.com or go to openminds.tv. So we're very excited about all of this stuff coming up. If you're wondering about magazines, we're going to start sending those out in the next week or so. So you should receive them hopefully by December. But regardless, luckily we've got those in, and they're really cool. It turned out beautiful. Alien Typology is a cover story, but we have a lot of really neat stories in there. So those will be coming soon, and you'll be able to buy them online, I don't know, in a bit too. But regardless, the magazine that is at the stores right now is our one on UFO landings, which includes Rendlesham Forest. So you got to go pick that up. That's at the bookstores. And luckily, we saw it, Colonel Charles Halt, just a couple weekends ago. We let him read the story, and he said that we did a great job and that it was very accurate to what really happened. So after we wrote the story, we were able to confirm that it was accurate. We already knew that, though. Antonio wrote his part, and Antonio's been really part of ufology since the Rendlesham incident, so he knows it in just very minute detail. Our YouTubes are getting really popular. Jason has been able to put up a couple more YouTube videos of some strange UFOs and extraterrestrials and pictures that come out of the Wendell Stevens archives. And these are pictures I think probably many of them have never been seen before by other researchers, or they're not out there in the public. So we're really, getting all of this information out for everybody to see. And you can see those by going to our Open Minds TV YouTube account and checking those out. And be sure to subscribe to that, because then you'll get a notification every time we put one up. And we're putting, at this point, 1 or 2 up a week. So we're really moving, and it's some really cool stuff. People are getting really excited about it, posting lots of comments. And also, there's some people, we had somebody give us some video a couple weeks ago. We're going to put that up. We're receiving pictures and videos occasionally. So we're getting all of that out to you so you can see some of the cool stuff that we are receiving, so you can stay on the cutting edge of UFO research. The biggest thing we do, staying on the cutting edge, is that we monitor all of the news sources out there, and when they're running UFO stories, we're posting those on a daily basis on the website. And of course, as usual, we have our UFO news correspondent, Jason McClellan, here to share the latest. Hello, Jason.
Greetings, Alejandro, and hello, world. This is your Open Minds news brief for Monday, November 15th, 2010. Now, Alejandro, last week was another sort of media crazy week surrounding some UFO news, or alleged UFO news that got picked up all over the place, around the world, in fact. Last Monday evening, the pilot of a Los Angeles CBS affiliate news helicopter was filming the sunset when he captured footage of what many believe to be a launched missile 35 miles off the coast of LA, north of Catalina Island. The footage of the rocket-like condensation trail spread quickly, and media outlets around the world began reporting the launch of a mystery missile off California's coast. The U.S. military had no scheduled launches during that time, and the government seemed baffled by the incident. The Pentagon, Navy, Air Force, FAA, Coast Guard, and NORAD were all unable to explain the mysterious aerial object. Media organizations around the globe reported opinions from experts who offered varying explanations for the mysterious contrail. While some experts said the object was clearly a rocket, others offered the opinion that the object in the sky was simply an airplane, and the rocket-like appearance of the contrail was the result of a combination of the camera's angle and the setting sun. The Pentagon's investigation was called off after a couple days, being satisfied with the airplane explanation. Backing up this explanation is the FAA's report that no fast-moving, unknown objects were detected on radar. Also, as theoretical physicist and professor Dr. Michio Kaku pointed out on Good Morning America, the contrail in the video seems to change direction, and missiles don't generally change direction. And finally, in a city of nearly 4 million people, no one, other than the pilot of the news helicopter, reported seeing anything unusual in the sky that evening.
Yeah, very interesting. I think there's a couple of things that's interesting. First of all, a lot of the experts, Jane's Defense, of course, is a big deal. They're the biggest publication regarding high-tech weaponry, and they said it was a rocket. Some other experts said a rocket, but highly debatable. But what's interesting is kind of the military's reaction, and that it's similar with UFO sightings, where here, if it was a rocket, people didn't report it. FAA said they didn't have any reports on it. The military saying, coming up with a couple different stories before they finally landed on the airplane one. And of course, we've seen in the past, such as with the O'Hare incident over the airport, where the FAA says, oh, we didn't see any reports. No, we don't know anything about it. Until they got a FOIA request, where then they said, oh, yeah. Oh, you meant that UFO that was reported. Oh, we forgot about that. And all of a sudden, they fessed up to having these reports and everything. Really weird. I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's kind of strange that the experts that were non-government related that came out first were all saying rocket before this all started changing. And what does that mean if it is a rocket? That's kind of weird stuff.
It is, and you're right. It's very strange how the military and the government handled the situation, and they didn't seem to have any concrete evidence pointing one way or the other. Their official statement just said, we're happy with the airplane explanation, so we'll go with that one.
Right. Yeah, that works for us. Let's just leave it at that. And but of course, even early reports saying it was in the ocean off 35 miles off the coast where they suspected, or I don't know how they came up with that idea that that's where it came from, when they suspected it was a rocket launch from a submarine.
I don't know how they would come up with that either, especially when later they said, oh, it was a plane from Hawaii to Phoenix.
Yeah.
I mean, where did they get that origin from?
Yeah.
The whole thing is strange, and just like we've seen with the latest UFO hype with mass sightings, the New York UFO or balloons or whatever it was, then you start getting sightings all over the country. Right away, there was another missile sighting in New York,
right.
in Brooklyn, I believe, and photos were posted of that, and these just look like normal airplane contrails that we see every night because we're right under the flight path of the planes coming into the airport.
Yeah.
But people started reporting these left and right, saying, oh, there's a missile here, there's a missile there. So same thing all over again.
But because of that O'Hare incident, because of Stephenville, because of other things, you know, it's kind of sad, but I've learned, and I think people are starting to learn, that unfortunately you can't trust the military and the government, though. It seems like the military is just going to lie. They just want to lie about everything, and that's their knee-jerk reaction, is to lie. And the unfortunate thing is you can't trust them. So
you never know what to believe.
Yeah.
And that is sad. That is sad.
It is.
A very strange object was spotted in the sky in Scarborough, England last week. Witnesses who videotaped the UFO describe it as possibly being two objects, a saucer-shaped object and another object with a hooked tail. Ex-Ministry of Defense UFO expert Nick Pope commented, "It's pretty spooky. At first glance, it appears to be a cloud, then it seems to be bombing along purposefully." Crowds of people apparently observed this strange object or objects. I didn't see the two objects. It seemed like one object to me, but...
Well, I think what happened is with the video, it was a clip of the first one and a clip of the second one.
Okay.
And they didn't distinguish that, so it looked like one longer clip. I think that's what happened. And but the video is weird. I mean, it does kind of look like a small cloud drifting along, but it does seem to have this definite shape to it. And it's not like the, what are those clouds called that look like UFOs that are over
Lenticular.
mountains? Lenticular. It didn't look like that because it was much smaller. Someone even called it looked like a smoke ring floating across the sky.
I thought it sort of looked like a jellyfish that wasn't moving.
Yeah.
Had its head and then sort of a dangly whatever.
Yeah.
Just a mass kind of moving.
Yep.
And when I first saw it, I thought it looked like a kite. But then when you watch it move, it doesn't move like a kite at all. It's probably the weirdest video I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, really weird video. Another one that's some pretty good video, where I wish the media would jump on some of these ones that are really more unexplainable.
Right.
Like this one, and the blue one we talked about last week.
Because this one is quite different, and the blue light as well. Yeah, you're right. Also in England, a black triangle-shaped UFO was spotted in London's Sutton suburb last week. Two friends spotted the UFO and described it as being 4 to 5 times the size of a commercial airliner. The silently moving triangle was also described as having 3 main lights, 1 in each corner, and smaller blinking lights. And this comes just I believe this happened the same day as a national newspaper reported another triangle sighting in the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of these triangles keep popping up. I mean, very strange stuff.
Not that it's indicative of man-made craft, but blinking lights usually are, but that's not to say that UFOs don't also have blinking lights.
Yeah. Well, and there was a sighting recently, I remember, with a blinking light that just... even some of the airport people said it was not a type of blinking light. Remember, that was a good video that came out.
Right.
And it looked very strange, this blinking light. And I think it was, what color was it? It was a color that usually they don't use. Maybe it was blue. I can't remember right now.
It might have been blue.
But it was a very strange looking blinking light. That was another good video that came out fairly recently.
Here's a sad story. A mother in Wales, England is calling for a ban on Chinese lanterns. Now, that's not the sad part. I know many ufologists who wouldn't mind if Chinese lanterns were banned, but this comes after boiling wax fell from a Chinese lantern and landed on the face of her 3-year-old son. The family was having a fireworks party, and the 20 children in attendance each released a Chinese lantern. That's a lot of kids and a lot of Chinese lanterns.
Yeah.
But as the lanterns took flight, everyone was looking upwards, watching the lanterns rise in the sky, when melted wax from one of the lanterns fell from the sky and covered the face of this poor little boy. It's really sad seeing the pictures of his melted face.
I know. It's a very sad, cute. He's just a little guy, right? 5 years old?
3 years old.
3 years old.
Yep, and they were having a good time and splat. And while it's extremely sad, you know, these things can happen, and I don't think it's a reason to ban Chinese lanterns altogether.
Well, that's why they tell kids don't play with fire.
That's right.
But I guess it's a warning. Anybody messing with these things, don't stand under it.
Right.
Get away.
Those Chinese lanterns are nothing but trouble.
Launch it and then run as fast as you can, at least a quarter mile in the opposite direction.
Just don't look up at something that has hot wax dripping.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Tourism NT has rejected a funding request for a UFO conference in Darwin, Australia. We talked about this recently, this conference they're trying to put on because Australia's Northern Territory has become quite a hotspot for UFOs lately. According to their website, Tourism NT is the government division responsible for encouraging and fostering the development of tourism in the Northern Territory. UFO researcher Alan Ferguson is the individual who is trying to organize the conference in Australia's Northern Territory, an area that has become a UFO hotspot. Tourism NT denied Ferguson's request for funding, explaining that they happily provide assistance to conference organizers, but funding is only offered for tourism events. According to NT News, Ferguson tried explaining to Tourism NT that the exposure a UFO conference will bring is more than anything else they can put together. And it's the most up-and-coming phenomenon in the world. That's what he says. There's still hope that Ferguson will be able to secure some government funding because the Northern Territory Tourism Minister is exploring the benefits of UFO tourism. And that's something that lots of cities have been looking at as UFO tourism because it's become quite popular.
Yeah, I think now there might even be, there's more than one. It used to be, you know, and they only started fairly recently. Roswell, they were spending money, and they got approved, luckily, to continue spending money on their festival. And I think maybe in the Shag Harbor one, of course, I think that's in Canada, but I think their city spent some money. And then what's the other one? Exeter, New Hampshire, I think is the other one where they spend some money for theirs. So there's a couple now that are doing that. Although the vast majority, of course, of these conferences, they don't get funding from tourism boards or anything. UFO Congress, we don't get any funding from tourism. We get our funding from the wonderful people like our listeners who come to the conference to see the incredible speaker lineup that we have. But the city, maybe Phoenix one day will give us some money. That'd be cool.
Maybe one day. I mean, Phoenix definitely, I think we get enough of our fair share of UFO tourists.
Yeah, well, I just hope that it doesn't, make him feel like he shouldn't go forward with this, or I hope he wasn't, contingent on getting this money to have his conference. So, because it's definitely something that I'm sure will be very popular, because as we've seen, we even posted one today about some UFOs in Queensland. I mean, UFOs in Australia is big news right now.
That's right. Australia's Northern Territory isn't the only area of Australia experiencing lots of UFO activity. The Sunshine Coast on the eastern coast of the continent gets regular visits from UFOs. UFO Research Queensland has been recording UFO reports since 1956. The data shows that balls of orange or white light are the most frequently reported UFO in the area. These balls of light usually appear as a single ball, but they have also appeared in triangular, boomerang, or straight line formations, and occasionally they're seen traveling in clusters of up to 20 or more objects.
Whoa. Yeah, in fact, our next magazine, the 6th we're working on right now, is going to be on crop circles, and we write about the Thule, they used to call them saucer nests. This is before the word crop circle was coined, and they had some events up there in Queensland in that area where they had these weird circular formations in reeds that they believe coincided with UFO sightings, and they called them saucer nests. Could be the first, the first decent wave of UFO or crop circles. So that's area has been very busy with strange phenomena for many decades.
We should take a field trip.
Let's go.
That is it for the news for today. Remember to check out these stories and more at openminds.tv, your source for UFO-related news. I'm your Open Minds news correspondent, Jason McClellan, and you've been briefed. Back to you, Alejandro.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for your briefs.
My briefs are my own, my friend.
Oh, I meant your news briefs. Man, he has got his mind in the wrong place. All right, there's the news, a lot going on. We also, of course, have our articles online, and just to kind of tell you about some of the things that we've been writing about, which are pretty exciting. Of course, like I said earlier, we've been posting Wendell's UFO photo archive, some never before seen UFO pictures, and just really old UFO investigations that we're digging out of the archives because they're very interesting stuff that we're putting online. We've still got that going on. This is really cool too. One of the Chilean army officers who actually was a contributor to Leslie Kean's book has written his own book. Of course, it's not in English, unfortunately, but Rodrigo Bravo Garrido, who is a captain and pilot for the Chilean army, published a book on pilot cases. So, and what's kind of cool about this is that he was, I think, the youngest contributor to Leslie Kean's book, and he is still serving in the military, and he wrote his book. In fact, we're going to have an update on this story really soon here, and in this update, we're going to post some pictures. We'll probably post that as soon as maybe tomorrow or the next day. Some pictures of him in his uniform as he goes to book signings and as he went to this press event about his book. So he is still in the Chilean army and, wearing his uniform, and he's not getting in trouble for kind of going out there and supporting his book and what he's up to. So this is very cool story. You can see a bit of what's in his book in this story that is up online right now that Antonio had wrote. And you'll definitely want to read this because it's, at least right now, as much of the book in English as you're going to get for now. Hopefully he'll print that in English also, because it looks to be a very, very interesting book. Of course, we've got some other updates, such as the missile in New York that Jason had talked about. And then, more recently, I also on Friday wrote a story about angel hair. Some of you might have heard of the angel hair phenomenon. Essentially, what has happened is there have been times when people have found this strange material that falls from the sky, and essentially the properties are typically when it started and throughout history that this has happened, where they kind of pick it up and you feel it and it just dissolves right there in your hand. So it's been really hard to collect, and people have collected it over a period of time. The very first occurrences of this phenomena happened in the 50s in France. And one of the big, at least the first time it kind of made a name for itself, was this sighting of a large cylindrical object that kind of had a cloud on one end, and then 30 little UFO little guys, these little red spheres with these yellow rings around them, kind of were raining down this strange angel hair stuff. You know, people went and grabbed it, and it dissolved in their hand, and it was very strange. Well, this occurred a bit in the 50s, and if you remember, that France in the 50s had a big UFO wave, especially in the mid-50s. UFOs all over the place. In fact, we wrote a story, and you might remember the wine, Les Cigares Volants. I don't do French that great, but I think I do okay on that one. Anyway, it's a great wine if you can go out there and find it. And this wine has an image of a UFO over a vineyard on its label. And on the back, it tells a story about, I talked a little bit about this with Jacques Vallée, with the Chateau de Papel. Of course, he said it a lot better. But essentially, where these UFOs were flying around, and the mayor of this town said, we ban all UFOs, and if a UFO lands, then the police are supposed to go there and impound it. UFO never landed there. But essentially, during this period of time, there was just a big UFO wave, and this angel hair phenomena started then. Well, it kept happening occasionally, and there's been different stories on it and different research that has been done. But the best research I think that I've seen has been done by Brian Boldman, and we have a link to his report that he wrote about it in the International UFO Reporter, where he really did a great analysis, and he found that during that flap in the 50s and during the United States flap of UFOs in the 70s, that there were more angel hair occurrences, and that there was definitely a correlation between those period of times of lots of UFOs and this strange debris. So he was at least able to demonstrate that there possibly is a UFO connection. Also, he was able to find cases where there was some analysis done, because in some cases throughout time, these different occurrences had made big news, and they were in newspapers, and people had collected this material and were able to get it to labs. And in several different research opportunities that were had from Australia to Japan, I think, and Italy, just different places around the world, they found similar substances that really couldn't be explained why this stuff would be together and why it would be creating this angel hair type of stuff. So it's very interesting, and I've got some links here to some of the different stories on the UFO cases linked to the angel hair, and even the Condon Report did a little section on angel hair. So it's one of those little kind of known things related to UFOs, which all of these things we try to reinvigorate so people don't forget some of these other strange phenomena that are related to UFOs that are unexplainable, because there's so much that cannot be explained with this phenomena. And then a story just posted today by Jason kind of put this together, but it's an investigation or a little report that Wendell Stevens had put together on these orbs that were seen right here in this area of the world, actually in Arizona. And just a lady who tells a story and has some pictures of some small little orbs that she had taken pictures of in the night, kind of flying around. And then also she was able to find some of these strange little things on the ground. So she's got pictures of those in here as well. And then Wendell put together a report on all of this, telling the whole story. So it's a very interesting story. Another good find by our good friend and news correspondent Jason McClellan. That guy's just doing a heck of a job over there. So really cool stuff. Check it out. And like I said, we've got lots of cool stuff on our YouTube, including this really weird ET picture we found in Wendell Stevens' archives. So we'll keep getting those up for you guys because people are really liking them. So go subscribe to our YouTube, and also, of course, keep an eye on our Facebook. We update that when this stuff comes out. And the website. It's always best to, I'm really going to recommend that you all just go ahead and make openminds.tv your homepage at your home and at your work, because you're going to be able to keep up to date. And you know what you'll find is if your boss comes over to yell at you, "What are you doing? That's not the work website. What do you have?" You'll just say, "Well, boss, I'm looking at this story. Look at this Chilean army officer is writing about pilots and UFOs. This is incredible." And your boss is going to take a look. He's going to say, "Wow, thanks for telling me about this." You'll probably get a raise. So that's why I recommend make openminds.tv your homepage. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and listen to this interview with Linda Moulton Howe. I'm really excited to play this because she really gets into detail on this incredible event that she went through at the Air Force. And essentially, she's going to start off talking about HBO because that's where the whole story started. She got this opportunity to make this documentary for HBO, and this is what happened.
The director of documentaries at Home Box Office, Jean Abinator, she called me up, said she had heard about this documentary, A Strange Harvest, wanted to see. I sent her a copy. The next thing, they came to me and said, we would like to contract you to produce an hour for home box office that would go beyond A Strange Harvest. We discussed a working title of UFOs, the ET Factor. I signed a contract in New York City on March 21st, 1983, to begin working for HBO and officially left Channel 7 with the idea that I would then continue to work independently to produce, write, direct, edit, and report, and be able to be free to follow up on this enormous subject of not only the animal mutilations that were global, but the human abduction syndrome that paralleled right along with the animal mutilations in the sense of a global report in which beam technology was being reported by law enforcement, by people in the abduction syndrome. That beam technology had been seen and reported by ranchers who would see something that was glowing. It was round in the sky. It would have a beam. It would go down into a pasture. I talked with people who had seen animals rise in this beam. I talked with people who had seen animals go down in the beam. I could not get those people to stand up in front of my television camera and report it because they were so afraid of their fellow human beings assaulting them with ridicule and satire if they told the truth on television. Well, when I started on the home box office program, I already now knew that I had to go as strongly as I could with forensic evidence, which is what I had done in A Strange Harvest. I had to get firsthand eyewitnesses who would be willing to stand up in front of a home box office camera. And I was excited by it and was relieved when I received a phone call from Peter Gersten, an attorney in New York, who said, I understand you're in New York. Somebody had told him, and he said, I'd like to go to dinner before you go back to Denver and talk to you about information that I am getting of an extraordinary landing of some kind of a craft at Ellsworth Air Force Base in 1978, an exchange of some kind of weaponry. The security guard allegedly pulled a gun, whatever had landed, aimed a beam at the security guard's gun. It evaporated in his hand. He was left with third-degree burns or first-degree, whichever is the least. I always get them mixed up. The least powerful degree of burns in his hand. But nevertheless, this is a story that involves not grays, but something that looks very human with blonde hair and blue eyes, as I have had this report. And that Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, Larry Fawcett, Barry Greenwood were working with Peter Gersten, and that this would be a very good story for me to meet the AFOSI agent at Kirtland Air Force Base named Richard C. Doty, get the names of the witnesses at Ellsworth Air Force Base and phone contact numbers that he Doty, allegedly had, and that I would then work with Peter Gersten, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, as one of my segments in the new HBO documentary.
So did Doty approach Gersten with this? Okay.
Yeah, Gersten brought all of the correspondence from Richard C. Doty, AFOSI Kirtland, in his briefcase to the dinner meeting in New York the night after I had signed the contract at HBO. Yes, that's exactly how it happened.
Gotcha.
And it is Peter Gersten who set up the phone conversation with Richard Doty to set up a meeting where I would come and get the information on Ellsworth Air Force Base. That is exactly. It was Gersten, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. They were making all of the arrangements. I was the producer beginning the script for HBO on the working title UFOs, the ET Factor. The meeting was set up in a combination of phone calls between Peter Gersten, Richard C. Doty, and Linda Moulton Howe. And on April 9th, 1983, I flew to Albuquerque to get the information on Ellsworth Air Force Base. I thought I would be in this meeting for 15 minutes and on my way. In fact, I had a whole series of other meetings, itineraries, people that I wanted to see because I was trying to get a script put together with some substance and I needed people who were willing to go on the record. And this is the famous meeting written about in my first book, An Alien Harvest, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the only honest portrayal of the facts, my book, An Alien Harvest, where I go to the Kirtland Air Force Base. Richard Doty had met me to take me onto the base because I could not go to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and enter as a reporter. I had to be with somebody who could go through the punch lock doors and all of that. And he is who I was to meet with, so that's how I got into Kirtland, and that's where we went to. I think later I have photographs of the building and the sign and all of that I took. And we went into a large office in the OSI building that was not Richard C. Doty's office. It had the name of, he said, "This is my boss," and he is allowing me to do this meeting here. I was naive to think that I could have a meeting privately with somebody working on an HBO special in an AFOSI office at Kirtland Air Force Base that would not be audio taped and videotaped. I learned this long after that meeting in which he presented me the startling briefing paper for the President of the United States.
Now, did that briefing paper say it was Magic 12 from Majestic 12?
No.
Okay, some people claim that.
It's embedded in my brain, and everything, every single thing that I saw and experienced, I reported in the 1989 released An Alien Harvest. You can take everything that's in there, including the documents. That's Linda Howe's The Pressure of Fact. That is the accurate reporting of what happened. I learned much later by somebody, I think, without question, was working in intelligence, was completely aware of this meeting, knew that I was audio taped and videotaped. I did not know that. But that would explain why I was in this large, large office that was not Richard C. Doty's office, and would also explain this. When I came into that office that had this huge desk, Richard C. Doty sits in his alleged boss's chair behind the desk. There was a normal-looking chair if you're facing him and facing the desk, there was a normal-looking small chair to the left. That's what, at the corner of the desk, that's where I sat down. And we began with Gersten, Fawcett, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, information about Ellsworth Air Force Base, all of that. It was very clear he didn't want to talk about that. He reached over into the left-hand drawer, top drawer, pulled out an envelope that didn't have any markings on the outside. It was like a plain manila envelope. He reached in, pulled out a file. As he's pulling the file out, he was saying, "My superiors," that was exactly his phrase, "my superiors have asked me to show you this document. You can read it. You cannot take notes." I remember how jarring that was. No reporter anywhere in the world wants to be in a situation where suddenly somebody is telling you you cannot do something, you cannot take notes. That's alien to me. That was very, I remember that like a slap on the face. You cannot take notes. I'm going to let you read a document. And then the kicker, I want you to move from the chair you're in to that chair. And he's pointing to this large sort of greenish leather chair that is in the middle of this room. It isn't, like, it makes no sense, this chair. It's not attached to sitting in any combination. It never occurred to me that chair was placed for the audio and the videotaping that was done. But I was so interested and curious about what is it that he's handing to me, and I think most people would be, that I decided, I mean, I didn't argue. I could have argued. I could have walked out right then, right? No, you're not going to tell me I can't take notes. No, I'm not going to sit in that chair. But there are some times in a reporter's life where you want to at least see what's being handed to you. So I got up and moved into this chair, knowing that I'm now about 10 feet or 12 feet in front of this desk, and feeling that the whole situation is now gone from normal, meaning I'm there to get names and addresses and phone numbers, to something highly abnormal, highly strange. And when I looked at the top of the top page, it was all caps typed, the way things were typed long ago before computers. And it said, it was all caps, briefing paper for. Briefing paper is on one line. I remember this like it's embedded in my mind. Briefing paper. Then the word for on the next line. Then the next line. President of the United States of America, all written out. Then on the next line, on the subject of. And then the next line, unidentified aerial vehicles, parent, UAVs, close parent. And I'd never seen unidentified aerial vehicles, and I think in the paper it also referred to unidentified aerial craft. Up to that point, like everybody else in the world, the acronym that was always thrown around was UFOs, unidentified flying objects. So I'm now looking also at an acronym I've never seen before and the phrases I've never seen before. There's no date. And as a reporter, that is the first thing I always look for in documents. I'm always looking for dates. And there was no date. But I turned that, we'll call it the formal all caps page, to the next page. It was double-spaced, and now we're back into the normal world of upper and lower, like sentence. And it was all typed. And it started out with a background on Project Sign, Project Grudge, the Robertson panel, a history. And I knew, and it was about the Mantell, that Mantell was chasing a disc and ended up with his plane in smithereens with the strange holes. All of that was like background. And then, like on the top paragraph of the second page, I believe, it gave a list of how our government had retrieved extraterrestrial craft, and I think that's where the unidentified aerial craft came into this play in this paper, unidentified aerial craft from, and there was a list, and it included Aztec, it included 2 completely different retrievals from the region of Roswell, New Mexico, 1 in 47 and 1 in 49. The 1 in 49 is where they retrieved a live extraterrestrial biological entity, and it was taken by an Air Force captain to Los Alamos National Laboratories, where it was kept and communicated with telepathically only from 1949 until June 18th, 1952, when the being died of unknown causes. This is in this paper I'm reading.
Yeah.
And then it went into Kingman, Arizona, Laredo, Texas, a place in Mexico south of the border. These are all areas where we had allegedly retrieved unidentified aerial craft or vehicles associated with extraterrestrial biological entities. You can imagine my astonishment to be reading these words that are backing up everything I have been told by law enforcement and ranchers that we're dealing with creatures from outer space in the mutilations. And then it went into a paragraph that I have never forgotten. I can see exactly where it was in the page, and it said, these extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving Homo sapien primates to create, already evolving primates to create Homo sapiens. And I remember reading that sentence over and over and over, trying to grasp the implication that something from outer space had created us, which meant technically we are somebody's biological androids, or we are life that is set in motion by something else. And my mind was filled with the reasons. Is this linked to the genetic harvest in animal mutilations? Are they now using animals from Earth to create other androids? What service are humans providing if we have been made? All that was running through my head as I was reading these remarkable sentences. And another remarkable paragraph said, 2,000 years ago, these extraterrestrials created a being to be placed on this planet to teach Homo sapien about love and nonviolence. And I looked up at Dodie at that point and I said, we're talking about Jesus Christ here. Not a word. He never said a word. He just looked at me and nodded, and his face turned red. Then on the last 2 pages, it was about projects that our government had organized related to the presence of the extraterrestrial biological entities in their unidentified aerial craft and vehicles that went into Project Aquarius, Project Snowbird, Project Garnet, Project let me see if I can get that project. There was Pounce, there was Aquarius was last, Garnet, Snowbird. What is the famous, Pounce is related to it, Moondust, Project Moondust and Pounce. And summarized each of these, the most words being given to Aquarius, and the first one on the page of projects was Garnet. And the reason I remember it like it was embedded is that I said, remember your birth date, because I'm born in January and the birthstone is Garnet. And so it said, Project Garnet, all questions and mysteries about the evolution of Homo sapien on this planet have been answered and this project is closed.
So do you believe these documents were real, were truthful?
I think the content is. I think the document was prepared specifically to show me.
And why do you think he did that, or they?
Because they knew. Phones are tapped. Are you kidding? Everybody knew that I had signed a contract in New York to produce an hour for home box office.
So you think they wanted you to have some accurate information to put in the documentary?
I think they wanted to stop Linda Moulton Howe from doing anything for home box office. That's what they wanted.
Oh, to startle you into getting out of it?
Stop. No, because what happened next, you should read An Alien Harvest, my book. I'm serious. It's really valuable history for any and all of you. It's vital. You should read An Alien Harvest.
Well, it was a long time ago. I did, but it was a long time ago.
Oh, this is so
And,
critical.
you know, everything gets muddled because now I've read so much more or other stuff people have written about this account. You begin to forget what's right and what's not. Yeah.
I do. It's when
Well, it sounds like it. It's incredible,
I thank God every year of my life. Thank you for giving me a flypaper mind. I don't forget much. Please don't misunderstand that. I'm not saying that from any other perspective except thank God I have always had a kind of clarity of detail when I have been in important events and incidents. I don't forget audio. I don't forget things that are shown me. I remember it as if it happened yesterday. I'm so grateful that I was born that way. Otherwise, you're right. After 30 years, everything would be a huge muddle because there's been so much. But I'm telling you with crystal clear memory. And what happened? It's as if you look back and then you can see exactly how calculated the strategy. We're dealing with the same intel minds that got us through World War II, Alejandro. The OSS, and then that group that became the Central Intelligence Agency formally on September 18th, 1947, with the stroke of a pen by Harry S. Truman. That's a fact. Check it out. Don't take my word for it. I'm giving you what I know is a fact, but you can check it out. We had all of the Roswell stuff happening in July. So go July 4th to August 4th, August 4th to September 4th. That's 2 months. By September 18th, 1947, a few days after 2 months of the Roswell UFO crash notoriety, Harry S. Truman signs into law the Central Intelligence Agency. I've had a lot of people who work for that agency on extraterrestrial matters tell me it was because of the continuing and persistent disks and interactions with extraterrestrial biological entities that Truman decided that he needed that agency. So with the CIA coming into play, with the same minds who were adept not only in aggressive field intelligence, but what got us through World War II, maybe better than anything else, was counterintelligence, so that we could camouflage, so that we could break codes and put up completely false stories that Germany would buy. That's counterintelligence, and it got us through World War II. Well, when you come to everyone in the world knew that Linda Moulton Howe had signed a contract on March 21st, 1980 in New York City at home box office, probably tracked and trailed my whole trip, have a meeting with Peter Gerson, the attorney who filed the first Freedom of Information Act requests on behalf of citizens against UFO secrecy, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and that was released, I believe it was January of 1980 when they did the first story. The New York Times, Washington Post, everybody carried this, of all of those blacked out documents that Gerson had been able to get from the NSA, NSA, because it came into being in 52, CIA, 47. He had all those blacked out documents. It became a big news story that all of this stuff was done in camera, away from the media, and that what Gerson walked away with was all of these blacked out pages. And so I start not realizing at the time, not thinking that I'm being tailed. I knew my phone was tapped because people had given me the electronic equipment that you could turn on and the light would go red. I knew that. And I was doing all kinds of things to work as best I could off of their radar. But it never occurred to me that I was followed everywhere, photographed everywhere, which now it's been proved to me. I won't go into all of that, but it was. So by the time I am sitting in that AFOSI office and I'm being videotaped, I'm being audio taped for my reaction to what is being presented to me. I leave there. I go back eventually to Denver, to my home office. And what do? I do what any professional worth their salt. I call up Gene Abinader at home box office. I say, I've been exposed to information that lifts the notch of this work and this documentary, and tell her some of the outline, the briefing paper I've been shown, and Dodie had said. And we've got film from the Lonnie Zamora time. We've got film from Holloman Air Force Base that we would like to be able to share with you for your home box office documentary. You will have to work with a security person from NASA. You will have to sign non-disclosure agreements while you edit. You will not be able to edit the film the way you're used to. it will have to be locked up by security people, and you will not be able to edit on your premises. You will have to agree to edit in a military base. All of this was discussed with me, and I'm telling Jean Abinader, this is all by phone. She's in New York City. I'm in Denver. It is the first and only professional reaction I could possibly have. And she says, then we have to have a meeting with Bridget Potter, who was number 2 behind Michael Fuchs. You can check all these names. Michael Fuchs ran home box office. Bridget Potter was his number 2. Jean Abinader was director of documentary. Jean Abinader says we have to have a meeting with Bridget Potter. We might have to have a meeting with Michael Fuchs. And the date was set May 18th, 1983. I was in Kirtland on April 9th, 1983. I didn't get home for a week because I did continue to do research and work. So this is a meeting that is about 1 month after that will fit into the New York City schedule. And Jean Abinader said, this will have to go, Linda, this will have to go to all the executives of home box office because you're talking about something major. Well, that's a natural reaction, right?
Right.
But we're tapped, Alejandro. They know every single discussion. They know what I'm communicating. They know the date. They know what I'm going to do. They know I'm going to be sitting in front of executives. And what is the next thing? I get a call from Richard Doty saying, Linda, we understand that you need, because I said I need verification for all of that you've outlined. I need it on some official Air Force or government agency letterhead that I can take to a meeting, because I called and said I'm going to go to home box office. I need verification that you will provide film, that I will have people who will talk to me on the record about the subjects that you have said. All of that. It's normal. I'm operating as a normal professional. The counter-intel world takes advantage of the fact that people who are professionals act in professional ways. They communicate. You have to set up dates and times. You have to have meetings. Well, Doty says, Linda, I'm not in control of this. I have to go to my superiors. That was his constant phrase. I have to go to my superiors, and I will tell them that you need a formal letter that will confirm that film will be released to you from Holloman and Lonnie Zamora time to use in this home box office special, and that you will be allowed to edit under military guidance on this film and all of this. This is all going on the phone. And the May 1st comes, where is my letter? Always, Linda, I'm not in control of this. I am putting in your requests. I said, I'm going to this meeting. I have to be sitting in front of Jean Abinader and Bridget Potter and people at HBO on May 18th, and the time, the place, the location. I need the letter of verification from you all in order to continue going through with all of this project. Well, I'm trying, right? I go to New York. I have never received anything. I sit in front of Bridget Potter. I tell her what I told you that I read in this document, and that I'm supposed to be given film that would involve some sort of a landing and exchange at Holloman, and the Lonnie Zamora story would be told for what it was as part of the Holloman landing, and the latitude, longitude, and time were off. And she's looking at me, and her eyes are getting wider, and I knew she's afraid. I knew I'm scaring her to death. But if I'm not able to explain why the ante on this project is going up, according to the AFOSI guy at Albuquerque, if I can't talk to them, then how in the world am I going to produce what'll take me another 9 months with HBO money, coming under contract, you have to meet dates and you have to screen film. It's all going to be there anyway. And she ended up saying, I remember her red, long, glossy fingernails coming at me, sitting in front of her. Linda, unless you can bring me, this is a quote, it's in my book. I wrote that book a long time ago. It's all there. Unless you can bring me firsthand the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Secretary of Defense to back up what you're telling me, I'm not authorizing any more funding to go forward on this project.
Wow.
And Jean Abinader gasped. I still can remember. She's sitting off to, I'm facing facing Bridget Potter, and Jean Abinader was to the left. And so I can see their faces. And Jean Abinader gasped as director of documentaries, and her eyes were wide. And Bridget Potter got up, and I said, "Well, if you're not going to authorize funding for this to continue, Jean and I have been working on a script that does not include this material. I'm here because I'm telling you this is what has been said to me that I could include, but we can do an hour documentary that doesn't include any of this." And Jean Abinader spoke up and said to Bridget Potter, "Yes, Linda has already given me an outline of a script that I think will make a superb hour." And I watched Bridget Potter wave her hand at Jean Abinader and said, "No, I'm not authorizing any more funds until I have the administration's backing on what Linda is saying."
Wow.
And she walked out of the room, and Jean Abinader came up to me and said, "Look, I'll give you 6 months, October of 1983. If you can come up with anything," she said, "I think I can convince her and we can keep going." So for the next 6 months, even though no HBO money was authorized, I kept doing everything I could to make it come alive. And in October, I got I think it's an official HBO letterhead. This is to inform you that the development and script on UFOs, the ET factor, has ended, and you will never, something like, and you can never use this working title on any project going forward. And that's the rough and tumble world of government counter intel and large corporations, and I have dealt with it so many times that it becomes nauseating.
Now, did Doty deny this meeting ever happened?
No.
Okay.
No.
And it's...
Oh, what he did deny was that he ever showed me the briefing paper. And the thing that it just amused me is that when he tried, I can't remember now, I think it was with Larry Bryant. Remember Larry Bryant from Maryland, Washington area?
Yep.
And I think Larry Bryant did I can't remember now exactly whether it was in the context of a statement from Larry Bryant or an interview from UFON. I don't remember the context, but it was that Richard Doty had denied ever showing me any briefing paper. And it was like a universal chorus of people who said, "Are you kidding? Linda Howe doesn't lie. The person who is lying in this situation is Richard Doty." And it was very satisfying to me to realize he tried to get away with just thinking that he will lie to Larry Bryant, it will go out to the world, and everybody who knows me, I'm not a liar.
Well, it seems like he continues to do that. I mean, I don't know why anybody would trust him. He doesn't seem to be someone that it's wise to take his word for anything.
I think Alejandro, that he has always worked counter intel for somebody beyond AFOSI. But does that mean that the content in that typed up version for me is all wrong? No. The Mantel, the history, sign, grudge, everything. And now we know Alejandro, Richard Doty was only a part of my work in investigations from that April meeting of '83 until 6 months later when everything closed with HBO. That's it.
Right.
He didn't play any part in the rest of my world, my life, nothing. I had so many people who came to me after that whole period, and yes, I was very careful. And no, I have not gone with lots of information told to me off the record. But where do we stand today in 2010? With all kinds of support for Project Garnet, Project Moondust, Project Aquarius, Project Sign, you name it. How much? And Bob Wood, dear Bob Wood, who worked at McDonnell Douglas for years and struggled through the Timothy Cooper release and all of the challenges there. And Bob has come up with so many verifications on documents that would basically generally support that what I was shown was, I guess what I want to say, was a valid historic context to a reporter to say there is a large historic box for government knowledge and a policy of denial in the interest of national security. If you read this briefing paper and you don't come away with pause on what should be presented to the public, you're not understanding. I believe that's sort of what they have pulled on a lot of people. And my attitude has been the one thing in life that I've always tried to honor, my name to stand for ethical integrity and telling the truth. I've had a long career. I challenge anybody to go through my books and my TV programs and my radio programs, and if I have qualifiers on somebody and qualify that I'm able to report this, but I can't release the names, and that I completely understand that weakens the journalism, but sometimes I think information is worth sharing, even if I can't prove it. That's where the real X-Files part comes in.
Yeah.
That where I have backed up and reported information, and how many sheriffs, Alejandro, have communicated with me either firsthand, shaking my hand, or by letter saying, Linda, your book, An Alien Harvest, and the follow-up one with animal mutilations, the section, because Glimpses Volume 1 is divided into crop circles, human abductions, and animal mutilations. They said it's the only honest work on the planet. We're not dealing with a government paramilitary operation that a lot of people want to keep pushing this into, and I don't trust any of those people who are. I think they're somehow being paid off by somebody to do that. You take animal mutilations alone and all the forensic work that I was able to identify and work with at the University of Colorado, Rose Medical Center, Dr. Altschuler, veterinarians who are willing to do necropsies in the field with me, every single one of them saying that there's forensic evidence here that I cannot explain. And I've reported it and put photographs and spectra and graphics and interviews firsthand in my work. I mean, how much more can a person do?
One thing I want to ask is you've done a lot of work with UNICEF on the environment and ecology, obviously interested in those arenas and how we need to kind of improve our planet and our state of being. Does that relate to your work with the UFO, extraterrestrial, and cattle mutilation?
No. That's why I spent some time in the very beginning of this long conversation of Linda Moulton Howe, master's degree graduate, reporter, producer, writer, director, editor, all of that evolving profession, has never changed the beat that I've always been in: science, environment, and medicine. Those are the beats that I have always been in, am in to this day. And thrust into all three of those came the animal mutilation phenomenon that law enforcement told me was being done by they always said creatures from outer space.
So then overall, what is your goal in life as a journalist? What is your goal in sharing?
To always be going after the breakthroughs, the mysteries that are real and challenging, whether it is, for example, this new fungus that has turned up in Vancouver, Oregon, Washington, and California, has killed 10 people. Fungi are not supposed to be killers of animals and humans. And I am working on a fascinating interview with the Duke University head of genetics and microbiology, who is doing lots of the work on this new and threatening fungi. That is a mystery. That is an earth mystery. And I go after that earth mystery just like I did the animal mutilation mystery. What can I bring to bear in terms of the pressure of fact? What can I do in the field in terms of going to people who are studying anything related to soil and plants and fungi and microbes and on and on? And that is what makes me tick. I have always loved to explore that which pops up on this planet, challenges in science, environment, and medicine, and try to understand and bring to bear facts and report it to the public. That's what I love to do. And the fact that one of the stories in this long career of mine, trying to do exactly what I just said in science, medicine, and the environment, explore earth mysteries, find facts, and report them to the public, is that huge arena of animal mutilations relating to something non-human interacting with our planet that I first encountered in a real way, meaning sitting across and interviewing law enforcement in September of '79. Right. And now it's 2010. And 30 years later, I've certainly learned a lot. I've certainly reported a lot. I have not a single question in my mind that we're dealing with a variety of non-humans with mixed agendas, of which part of their agenda is genetic harvest from Earth life.
Now, do you feel that the public's view and on this whole arena has changed in the period of time you've been working on this?
Absolutely. And what I would say is the best evidence of that was Stephen Hawking, the famous astrophysicist and mathematician, the man who has made breakthroughs on black hole physics and quantum physics beyond Einstein by far, who unfortunately is encaged in that poor diseased body, but his mind continues ranging the universe, and he communicates and writes books. And when in April of 2010, Stephen Hawking went on the record in the Discovery Channel series, Is There Life Elsewhere in the Universe? I believe that it was something like that as a title. And they interview Stephen Hawking through his electronic machine that can translate from him to, so you can hear in English. And he said, not only mathematically must there be other life in the universe, this is Stephen Hawking saying this, but that he was cautioning that we should not be trying to send out radio signals or SETI signals because it might not all be friendly. I think that is one of the most important statements of this century and certainly the last century coming from Stephen Hawking. Second, less than a year ago, on June 25th, 2009, one of the most important press releases of the last 30 years was issued by former Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the Deputy Base Commander at the big RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge Joint UK-US Air Base near Ipswich in England, north of London, where there was a series of beams, lights, and at least one craft in Rendlesham Forest, and that deputy base commander, for the first time in 30 years, goes on the record in a press release stating that the beams and the lights that he encountered in Rendlesham Forest were, this is a quote, extraterrestrial in origin, close quote. He goes on in the press release to say that counterintelligence using classic deceptive modes have blocked and manipulated information about what happened in our Bent waters. And this is another startling statement. So far, as of May of 2010, I am the only reporter in the world who featured that press release and my interviews with Charles Halt and at least a dozen people since I did all these interviews beginning the summer of 2009 because Charles Halt went on the record. I expected that press release would be all over the New York Times, the Washington Post, that we would see it on MSNBC and CNN and the network. I expected that Charles Halt would be on Larry King and Oprah and everywhere, saying finally the Bentwaters phenomena was extraterrestrial in origin. And Alejandro, how would you explain the complete and total silence about such an important on-the-record statement by the former deputy base commander who was out in the Rendlesham Forest woods with a team of at least 30 men with Geiger counters, star scopes, carrying his own audio tape recorder, of which excerpts have been on television periodically over the last 30 years. No one in an official capacity until June of 2009 ever said it was extraterrestrial in origin. Why is that not covered everywhere in the world?
Well, and how do we change that, do you think, to make them pay more attention?
I think Stephen Hawking's statement that did make worldwide media, that was, to me, encouraging that someone with his brain power, his respect globally, would go on the record and make those statements in April of 2010 is a beginning. And in the last 12 months, the Vatican in Rome, which has lost huge respect around the world, but the Vatican had always been held out. The Catholics, you can't, Margaret Thatcher's famous statement, yes, Bentwaters happened, but you can't tell the people, ... meaning it would be too much of a shock and all of that. Well, when you go back in the last 12 months, the Vatican made 2 statement releases by somebody at least officially, supposedly representing the Pope, saying that if we now find other life in the universe, it will not be a threat to the Catholic philosophy. Mm-hmm. Well, why did the Vatican decide to do that in the last 12 months?
Yeah, that's the question.
So I just keep trying to put one foot in front of the other, as I always have. My only guide, it has always been my only guide, is the pressure of fact, going after whatever the truth is and trying to report it as credibly as I can, and knowing that we're in a revolution on this planet in so many directions. Environmentally, the entire global climate is changing. Politically, in both hemispheres around the world, there is dismay at leadership everywhere. Something is changing. I don't know where it's headed, but I know that the human Homo sapien life form cannot keep destroying the earth the way it has been and survive itself. Our very survival depends upon changing the way we do things, changing humans' relationship to the planet, or we're not going to survive as a species, no matter what our origin is. Therefore, this is truly a time of revolution. Where it will go over the rest of the 21st century, and when the non-human intelligence that I think has been interacting with this planet for not only thousands of years, but millions of years, will it decide to introduce itself? And that would pull the rug out from under all government policies of denial in the interest of national security.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a waiting game, waiting for humanity to grow up enough that they could be introduced by human governments without threat, without panic, without fear? That's my hope, that it could be done as a joint, humans have grown up enough that we can finally get on with truth. Because this planet, Alejandro, this entire planet is living a gigantic lie perpetrated by centuries of greedmongers and government controllers who have kept telling everybody we're alone in this universe, and we're not.
Well, I think I've got a lot of stuff here. I think I've got enough to write, fill the entire magazine with Linda Moulton Howe stories. But
well, I think part of this was to give you some clarity on how this life has evolved against all of these unbelievable obstacles. And to me, I look at my professional life as a TV producer and an investigative journalist, that if you just keep trying to keep going, and that you have only one guidance,
right,
and that is to just keep going after facts. They can throw intel at you from here till hell freezes over. But if you are sensitive to it and you ignore it, and you don't let the, what is it that Stanton calls them?
The noisy negativist?
Yeah, or whatever, that nabob, or what, he has that long phrase. If you don't let the bullshit of the world get to you, and you just keep focused on trying to understand and report, I think, I don't know, you tell me. I mean, I've had a long career, but I would say today my work is as relevant and straightforward now as it's ever been, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find yourself, it seems that a lot of this stuff, when it's not covered by conventional media, it kind of stays fresh to a lot of people, because, you know, they don't hear much about, for instance, cattle mutilations in the media. It's new to them, this stuff and the work that you've done. So it stays kind of fresh, where it's new to the public, so it can be repeated over, and people request that it's repeated over and over again.
Yes, I think you're making a good point, but I think complementary to that, and I hope that you will highlight this, headline it, make this the anchor of your report.
Okay.
Linda Moulton Howe did her graduate work at Stanford University, making documentary films for 2 years with the Stanford Medical Center and the Stanford Linear Accelerator, and her beat, ever since 1968, has never changed from science, the environment, and medicine. Is what I have always done.
Yeah, and I've
that
totally
is me.
gotten that point, and certainly I've recognized that that's definitely the heart of who you are and the heart of what this article about you needs to be.
And then you can place in that context one fall in 1979 to the spring of 80, she took on the death of animals that had no blood in tracks, and found law enforcement telling her that the perpetrators were creatures from outer space.
Right.
That is a bead in a long necklace of a lot of work that has taken me around the world, and I have done child survival films for UNICEF, because my interest is environment, science, and medicine. And so if you place a strange harvest, and then the HBO and everything that fell, those are beads in this necklace of work that has always been science, medicine, and the environment. This is what I do today. And then if you go to my news website, earthfiles.com, it's science, environment, and real X-Files, and I make it very clear. Real X-Files is there by subscription so that I can continue to do this work. I can't do that enormous, expensive website if I don't have subscription support. And that the Real X-Files is all the information that I think is important for people to consider, but I can't prove, and that's why I put it in Real X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
Science and environment is the big box within which I investigate Real X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that really is clear.
Science, environment, and medicine. That's going to be the quiz we're going to take tomorrow. What are the three things that Linda Howe's beat consists of? Science, environment, and medicine. She makes that abundantly clear in that incredibly interesting interview. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview is like I said while she was talking there, was because there's been a lot of stuff. If you go to the web right now and you look up Linda Moulton Howe at Kirtland Air Force Base, you're going to find a bunch of stories, a bunch of things that supposedly Dodie said, a bunch of things that supposedly happened to her, and a lot of them are not accurate. So there's this whole mythology that's been created around what happened at that time. And as she says, it's documented in her book, but now we have it on the air right here, laid out, play by play, what happened at Kirtland Air Force Base with Dodie. And this is one of the experiences, and there are multiple times where Dodie comes up in UFO history. And if you read, for instance, Richard Dolan's books, where he goes through really all of ufology, you see where these come up. And Dodie, who was Air Force Office of Special Intelligence, keeps coming up in these sort of disinformation schemes. He was involved with Serpo. He was involved with MJ-12. So it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. You know, one day I'm going to write a story on this for the magazine. You know, Dodie and his disinformation escapades. Is he working alone? Is he working with other people in OSI? Or does he still work for people like Linda Howe had suspects herself? Who knows what the heck's going on there? But I think this is all proof that the Air Force is certainly manipulating information and interested in what UFO researchers are doing. And why is that? That's the big question. So, great interview. I think this was a really cool to get all this out there for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we're going to have Ann Eller on the show. She was the secretary to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who, of course, was in charge of, or he was an advisor for Project Blue Book for the Air Force, their official investigations into UFO. He also was an advisor for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. She's also recently done her own book, Dragons in the Sky, Prophecies from the Star. So we'll talk to her We'll talk to her about her book and about these incredibly interesting stories that she relates about Hynek in his later years, and some very revealing information about Hynek. He's one of my favorites. He's the godfather of ufology. So this is going to be a great show. So we will talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us on Open Minds Radio, your UFO news authority. Talk to you next week, people.